Hello, vinyl community. Bradley here. Back for another double dose of classic jazz review. Today, the first album I want to talk about is by Joe Henderson, called In and Out. And look at that cover. Boy, that's iconic and beautiful. That could be used today. Very modern looking. In and Out was recorded in April of 1964 at the Van Gelder Studios by Rudy Van Gelder. Now, Joe recorded 5 albums for Blue Note. This is right in the middle. This is the third album as a leader. I believe he was on, I don't know, 30 or whatever other Blue Note albums as a sideman. This is hard bop, excellent hard bop. A little background on Joe Henderson. He was born and raised in Lima, Ohio, which is a stone's throw from where I live. When he graduated high school, he moved to Detroit, probably an hour and a half north of Lima, and he enrolled at Wayne State University in Detroit, and some of his classmates were Yusef Lateef, Barry Harris, the pianist, Donald Byrd, and these other guys were not classmates, but they were Detroit jazz musicians at the time. They were all up there. Ron Carter, the bassist, Paul Chambers, another bassist, Milt Jackson, vibraphone player for Modern Jazz Quartet, Elvin Jones, drummer, Kenny Burrell, the jazz guitarist. So Detroit had a very vibrant jazz scene, but they didn't really do much recording up there. That was done in New York, so you know, all the musicians, they pretty much would migrate to New York. But Joe's Henderson's style, he was a fan of Charlie Parker. So if you're familiar with Charlie Parker's playing, he would play a lot of notes. And Joe continues with that. Excellent solo player. He could play some really good solos. This album has Joe Henderson on tenor, sax, Kenny Dorham on trumpet, McCoy Tyner on piano, Richard Davis on bass, and Elvin Jones on drums. Henderson and Dorham hooked up. They were good friends. They hooked up for quite a few. They played together on quite a few albums. I really like Kenny Dorham's style. I've only got a couple of his albums, but I want to get a lot more. I just love his style. It's really good. He's a really good match with Henderson on here. I'm not going to go through the songs. He's got 5 songs on here. 3 of them were written by Henderson, and 2 were written by Kenny Dorham. I would highly recommend this album. Like I said, it's hard bop. How many stars would I give it out of 5? Actually, I like some of Henderson's other albums, maybe just a little bit better than this one, although this one is great. So I'm not going to give it 5, you know. And 4 stars would be maybe a little too low. So 4.5. How's that sound? But I would definitely recommend that album, and I love that cover. The next album, which when I decided to do these reviews, I thought, well, I would never review this album because it's been done so many times before. But I was reading a little more about this album, so, you know, bear with me. You might find out something you didn't know. I did when I was reading about this album. Of course, the best jazz album ever made. I'm not going to quibble with that. Miles Davis, Kinda Blue. It's on the Columbia record label. This was recorded, actually it was recorded 2 sessions, 2 different days. The first session, which includes, I believe, the first side of the album, was recorded on March 2nd, 1959. And the side B album, which has 2 songs, was recorded 7 weeks later, April 22nd, 1959. And the whole album was released in August of 59. 1959 had a bunch of classic jazz albums. Mingus, Ornette Coleman, Shape of Jazz to Come. Time Out by Dave Brubeck. This one, Kinda Blue. And Blue Train by John Coltrane. So you got 5 of the probably top 10 or 15 jazz albums of all time recorded in 1 year. Now, like I said, this was recorded for Columbia Records. So they had their own engineers. They didn't use Rudy Van Gelder. Ted Macero and Irving Townsend were the producers. I'm not sure who the engineer was. I heard his name, but I can't remember. But Ted Macero, as producer, he also produced Time Out that same year for Dave Brubeck. So it's good. This, it's not hard bop. I don't think they call it cool jazz, although I think maybe I would. I don't know. It's called modal, you know, using a different concept, because most, like today and for years, all rock songs and pop songs and country songs, they're based on chord progressions. The modal style is not based on chord progressions, based on using different scales and different modes. There are different modes. They got all kind of names. The Dionysus, Lydian mode, and that's beyond me. I wish I could understand it, but I don't know. The players on this album, you've got Cannonball Adderley on tenor, sax, Paul Chambers, bass, Jimmy Cobb, drums, John Coltrane, alto sax, Bill Evans plays piano on 4 of these songs. And on the fifth one, Wynton Kelly plays piano. Now, at this time, I believe, when this album was recorded, I think Wynton Kelly was the pianist in Miles' group. Bill Evans had been, previously. But Miles had this modal idea, and Bill Evans was really good at that stuff. Whereas Wynton Kelly, as far as modal, no. He played more of a hard bop piano, which is fantastic. So Wynton Kelly is only on one song, Freddie Freeloader. The rest of them are Bill Evans. So what makes this album so great? I came up with a few different things. One of them, which a lot of people don't really think about this, but it was recorded at the CBS studios on 30th Street in New York City, which was a converted church. It had been a church previously. And if you ever seen pictures of this studio, it is a huge, huge room. It's probably 100 feet by 100 feet. I don't know. It's very tall, very tall. It's like a cavern. Of course, all these, they played fairly close together when they were recording, and it was, mic'd closely, but still that room, that large studio, that affects the sound, which made it sound absolutely fantastic. Now, another reason this album is so good, you have two saxophones. You've got a tenor, Cannonball Adderley, and an alto, John Coltrane. Now, sometimes you get into big band music and you'll have who knows how many saxophones and horns. But in a small group setting, it's pretty rare when you have two saxes playing. In a small group, a 5-man group, two saxophones. That's different, And you're lucky if you get a good saxophone player. Well, on here, you've got Cannonball Adderley and John Coltrane. Two of the very best saxophone players. And actually on this album, there's very few places where they actually are playing at the same time. Of course, there are, parts of songs where they do that. But most of the time are the solos, where Coltrane will take one sax solo, and maybe right after that, Cannonball will come in with his solo. And if you don't have an experienced ear, you may get confused on who is playing the saxophone at a particular time. Now, if you're familiar with the styles of Cannonball or Coltrane, you can pick that out. But if you are not familiar, there's another way you can pick that out. On the first side of the album, which there are 3 songs, the first side of the album, on So What, Freddie Freeloader, and Blue to Green, John Coltrane will be playing out of the left speaker, and Cannonball will be playing out of the right speaker. So that's one way you can tell the difference. Now, as I said earlier, this was recorded in 2 sessions. I think I said that. Maybe I didn't. Well, the first session was recorded on March 2nd, 1959. Had those side A. The second session was 7 weeks later in April, and that is side B. Now, on side B, whatever, they when they mixed it, they just put the saxophones opposite of the first side. So on the second side, Cannonball Adderley will be playing out of the left speaker. and Coltrane will be playing out the right speaker. It's switched around. So that's kind of neat, you know. And a couple interesting things were one of the quotes, which I don't know if it applied to this album or not, but there was a quote where they said John Coltrane told Miles, because I think Miles got on him about his soloing, saying he didn't know when to quit, you know. And supposedly Coltrane said, well, I'm playing these solos, I don't know when to quit. Supposedly Miles Davis said, well, you take the effing horn out of your mouth. That's how you quit. So that was pretty good. And during these recording sessions, like I say, they were split up into two groups. Well, at the same time, Coltrane was recording his classic album, Blue Train. So between these two recording sessions, he went to Van Gelder's studio and was recording Blue Train. So, and I'm not sure if the album had been released or it was close to being released. The group got together and was performing, I think at Birdland maybe, for a week or something. And Miles Davis, he had documentation, like I don't know if he had a picture on him or something, that, you know, he was playing there. And he went outside between sets and had a smoke, and a cop came up. The cop had been drinking. You could smell it on his breath, supposedly. And he told Miles to move on. Well, Miles said, hey, I'm playing here. I came outside for a smoke. Well, things kind of escalated, and they ended up whacking Miles in the head with a billy club. And a small fight ensued, and he was charged with disorderly conduct, and he had to get a bunch of stitches and all that stuff. So that was kind of interesting. I guess that stuff went on back then. Well, and like I said earlier, Wynton Kelly just plays on one of these songs, Freddie Freeloader. So, and I think he was probably pissed off because he had replaced Evans, and they record this album, and who's the pianist on most of it? Bill Evans. Which, it's a very wise choice, because Evans playing, there's a lot of space on this album, which I like. I like a lot of space. So, sounds really good. I think that's pretty much it for Kinda Blue. Well, how do I rate that? Okay, I guess scale 1 to 5 stars. I'll give it a 6. It's classic. So, anyhow, I hope maybe you learned something from this. I did. So, this is Bradley. If you care to like, subscribe, or what's the other one? Like, subscribe, or I don't know. Anyhow, I will catch you later. See ya.